Today I'm thrilled to take you on a journey into the art of knitting a beautiful lace top. Throughout this step-by-step tutorial, I will be your knitting companion, sharing valuable tips and techniques. Together we will break down each step, starting with the back piece and moving on to the front piece. We will sew side and shoulder seams, pick up stitches for the neck and armholes, and ensure our finished project looks polished and stunning. But knitting is not just a series of techniques, it's an experience that fills your heart with a pure joy. That's why I have carefully chosen natural cotton yarn for our project. Its texture, especially when used in the lace stitch, feels absolutely heavenly. Through knitting we will find some sense of relaxation. No need to worry about complicated diagrams or stressful patterns here. We are going to take it easy and enjoy the soothing rhythm of simple knits. And let me tell you, my friends, the pride you will feel when you complete this top, it's beyond words. And you can find the link to the knitting pattern in the description below this video. I can't wait to see the incredible results we will achieve together. Let's start by knitting a swatch. Take your 5mm needles with a US 8, chosen yarn, and cast on an even number of stitches, for example 16. You can use your favorite casting method. I personally love the long tail cast on. Next, knit 1 by 1 rib for 6 rows. Here is how. Slip the first stitch knitwise, knit the second stitch. Purl the next stitch. Continue alternating between knitting and purling stitches across the row until you reach the last stitch. And finally, purl the last stitch. Repeat this pattern for the next 5 rows, knitting the knits and purling the purls. In the next row, it's time to switch to the larger needles for the lace stitch. Take your 6mm needles and slip the first stitch knitwise. Then purl the next stitch. Now comes the fun part. Yarn over, purl 2 stitches together. Once again, yarn over, purls 2 stitches together. That's it. So easy. Repeat this pattern until you reach the last 2 stitches. Finally, purl the last 2 stitches. Continue repeating this row until your piece measures approximately 17 centimeters or 7 inches with ribbing. To ensure the stitches on the left needle don't slip, you can use your finger to hold them in place. Also, if you find it challenging to work with the shiny metal needles for this lace stitch, consider switching to a different material. Non-slippery needles like wooden ones can be a great alternative. Additionally, check the tension of your yarn. Wrapping the yarn a few times around your fingers can help achieve the desired tension. Take a moment to check your swatch. Feel its texture, gently stretch to the sides. And ask yourself, did you enjoy to knit this lace stitch? I hope the answer is resounding yes. Why bother with swatching? Well, it's like a crystal ball for our knitting. As we knit this small sample, we will see how our yarn behaves and how the stitches look. But the best part, it helps us achieve that dreamy, also perfect fit. Now here's a little secret. Gauge isn't crucial for this pattern. However, if you have more than 15 stitches in a 10 cm 4-inch piece, you might want to consider using a larger needle or opting for a thicker yarn. On the other hand, if you find yourself with fewer than 10 stitches, try using smaller needles or a thinner yarn. Once you're satisfied with your gauge and have enjoyed the process of knitting the swatch, it's time to dive into the exciting journey of creating your very own top. Let me show you how to knit the back piece. I am making a size S, so I start by casting on 58 stitches using my 5mm US 8 circular needles. Then I am working one by one rib for 6 rows. I always slip first stitch knitwise and purl the last stitch for knit edge. Once ribbing is done, it's time to switch to a larger needles for 6mm or US 10 needles. Row 7 on the right side. Slip the first stitch knitwise. Purl the second stitch. And here's where the magic happens. Yarn over, purl 2 together. Yarn over, purl 2 together. I repeat this lace pattern until I have only 2 stitches left, and then I just purl the last 2 stitches. Keep repeating this row until the piece measures approximately 32 cm or 13 inches, including the rib. It's the length before the armhole. By the way, if you want it a bit longer, you can totally add some extra length here. This is my second project using this delightful lace stitch, and I must say I'm absolutely loving it. It's incredible how quickly and beautifully the fabric is progressing. The stitch brings me a deep sense of relaxation and inner balance. Well done! Check the width and length of this part. I would like to make my second top a little bit shorter, so I need 28 cm or 11 inches. Now let's move on to shaping the armholes. We will start by working the next row on the right side and decreasing stitches. To mark the side seams, place markers at the beginning and end of the row. Row 1 on the right side. I slip the first stitch knitwise, purl 1 stitch, purl 2 stitches together, then yarn over, purl 2 stitches together, and repeat yarn over and purl 2 stitches together until the last 4 stitches. purl 2 stitches together, purl 2 stitches, this will give me a stitch count of 56 for size S. Then row 2 on the wrong side. I slip the first stitch knitwise, purl 1 stitch, yarn over, purl 3 stitches together, and yarn over, purl 2 stitches together, and repeat yarn over and purl 2 stitches together until the last 5 stitches. Yarn over, purl 3 stitches together, purl 2 stitches. Now I have a stitch count of 54 for size S. Repeat these 2 rows 6 more times for a total of 8 rows, decreasing 2 stitches in each row. Row 3, 5 and 7 work the same as row 1, and for rows 4, 6 and 8 work them the same as row 2. After knitting these 8 rows, I have a stitch count of 42 for size S. I have decreased a total of 16 stitches. Now, on the row 9 on the right side, I slip the first stitch knitwise, purl 1 stitch, yarn over, purl 2 stitches together, and repeat these 2 stitches, yarn over and purl 2 stitches together until the last 2 stitches, purl 2 stitches. And repeat this row until the piece measures approximately 20 centimeters or 8 inches from the armhole marker for size S, and finish this part on the wrong side. And there we have it. This is the length before we move on to the neckline. Now it's time to cast off for the neckline. Let's follow these steps. Next row on the right side, I slip the first stitch knitwise, purl 1 stitch, then yarn over, purl 2 together, and repeat this pattern, yarn over, purl 2 together 5 more times. I will have 14 stitches on the right needle for the right shoulder. Then I cast off the next 14 stitches for the neckline. To cast off in the lace stitch, I knit the next stitch, knit the yarn over, lift the first knitted stitch over the second stitch and off the needle. Continue this process with the next stitch and repeat until all 14 stitches are cast off. I have 1 stitch remaining on the right needle. After that, purl 1 stitch tightly to prevent a hole after the cast off, and then yarn over, purl 2 stitches together 5 times. And purl the last 2 stitches. I have 14 stitches on the right needle for the left shoulder. I have finished the row and now I have 3 sections: the right shoulder, the neckline and the left shoulder. Let's finish both shoulders separately, starting with the left one. You can keep the stitches for the right shoulder on the needle, they won't be in the way, or use a contrasting yarn to hold them. Now, let's decrease for the left shoulder. I have 14 stitches on the needle with the yarn at the beginning on the wrong side, near the armhole. I continue knitting towards the neckline. row 1 on the wrong side. Slip the first stitch, knit twice, purl 1 stitch. Yarn over, purl 2 together. And repeat this yarn over and purl 2 together to the last 2 stitches. Purl 2 stitches. Row 2 on the right side. Slip the first stitch, knit twice, purl 1 stitch, purl 2 stitches together, yarn over, purl 2 together, and repeat yarn over, purl 2 together until the last 2 stitches. Purl 2 stitches. I have 13 stitches. Row 3 on the wrong side. Slip the first stitch, knit twice, purl 1 stitch, yarn over, purl 2 together. And repeat yarn over, purl 2 together until the last stitch. Purl 1 stitch. Row 4 on the right side. Slip the first stitch, knit twice, purl 2 stitches together, yarn over, purl 2 stitches together. Repeat yarn over, purl 2 stitches together until the last 2 stitches. Purl 2 stitches. I now have 12 stitches. Row 5 on the wrong side. Repeat the row 1. So, slip the first stitch, knit twice, purl 1 stitch, yarn over, purl 2 together, and repeat until the last 2 stitches. Purl the last 2 stitches. Row 6 on the right side. Repeat the row 2. Slip the first stitch, knit twice, purl 1 stitch, purl 2 stitches together, and repeat yarn over, purl 2 together to the last 2 stitches. Purl the last 2 stitches. I now have 11 stitches. Row 7 on the wrong side. We will repeat row 3. So, slip 1 stitch, knit twice, purl 1 stitch, repeat yarn over, purl 2 together to the last stitch. Purl the last stitch. Row 8 on the right side. Repeat the row 4. Slip 1 stitch, knit twice, purl 2 stitches together, repeat yarn over, purl 2 together to the last 2 stitches. And purl the last 2 stitches. Now I have 10 stitches. Row 9 on the wrong side. We will repeat again row 1. Slip the first stitch, knit twice, purl 1 stitch, repeat yarn over, purl 2 together until the last 2 stitches. And purl the last 2 stitches. And finally row 10 on the right side, cast off. For the right shoulder, if you slipped the stitches, return them to the needle and join the yarn at the beginning of the wrong side near the neckline. Then continue knitting towards the armhole. I have 14 stitches on the needle. Row 1 on the wrong side. Slip the first stitch knitwise or purlwise, depending on which one you have. Purl 1 stitch and repeat yarn over, purl 2 together until the last 2 stitches. And as usually, purl the last 2 stitches. Row 2 on the right side. Slip the first stitch knitwise, purl 1 stitch, repeat yarn over, purl 2 together until the last 4 stitches. Purl 2 stitches together, purl 1 stitch, knit 1 stitch. This will give me a stitch count of 13. Row 3 on the wrong side. Slip the first stitch purlwise. Just a quick note about slipping the third stitch as a purl stitch. Since we will be adding stitches for the neck later on, I didn't worry too much about how the edge stitches looked, so I slipped the first stitch as it is. However, I want your work to be perfect, so please follow along this way I move the thread in the video. This way you will achieve a smooth and even edge like this side, rather than like this side. Row 3 on the wrong side. Slip the first stitch purlwise, repeat yarn over, purl 2 together until the last 2 stitches. Purl the last 2 stitches. Row 4 on the right side. Slip the first stitch knitwise, purl 1 stitch, repeat yarn over, purl 2 together until the last 3 stitches. Purl 2 stitches together, knit 1 stitch. I now have 12 stitches. Row 5 on the wrong side. We will repeat row 1. Slip the first stitch, purl 1 stitch, repeat yarn over, purl 2 together until the last 2 stitches. Purl 2 stitches. Row 6 on the right side. Repeat row 2. Slip the first stitch, purl 1 stitch, repeat yarn over, purl 2 together until the last 4 stitches. Purl 2 stitches together, purl 1 stitch, knit 1 stitch. I have 11 stitches. Row 7 on the wrong side. Repeat row 3. Slip first stitch, repeat yarn over, purl 2 together until the last 2 stitches. Purl the last 2 stitches. Row 8 on the right side. Repeat row 4. Slip the first stitch, purl 1 stitch, repeat yarn over, purl 2 together until the last 3 stitches. Purl 2 stitches together, knit 1 stitch. I now have 10 stitches. Row 9 on the wrong side. Repeat row 1. Slip first stitch, purl 1 stitch, repeat yarn over, purl 2 together until the last 2 stitches. Purl 2 stitches. Row 10 on the right side. Cast off. The back piece is completed. Now let's move on to the next exciting step, working on the front piece.